Welcome to Successful Living with Bill Napick. Every week we talk about success and everything that goes along with it. You'll learn the principles of success, how to achieve success, and learn to overcome challenges that may be getting in the way of success in your life. You'll hear from Bill Napick, a radio personality and business development expert, along with insight from special guests. If you're ready to find your path to success or take the success you're enjoying to the next level, stay tuned. Successful Living with Bill Napick is on right now.
And welcome to the show, Successful Living with Bill Napick. I am Bill Napick, and today with Steve Rosenberg, our great sponsor with Empire Industries. And whether you're listening in Houston, Texas, Dallas, Texas, anywhere else, we think you're going to enjoy the show because we always have interesting people and we can always get some great ideas from our guest. And today, as I said, Mr. Steve Rosenberg. Steve, thank you and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bill. Always a pleasure.
Well, we're going to kind of fine-tune and have something special to talk about today. Successful living has a lot of implications to it, but certainly being successful is having our lives conducted in a dry environment. That's unless we're showering. But having a dry home, a dry place of business, and those that are in Houston and that have seen the national news, Monday, April 18th, 2016, for archive purposes, deadly storms dumped an astonishing 240 billion gallons of water over Harris County that week, that day. Almost 20 inches of rain fell in western Harris County. And they talked about the 500-year flood levels. And what's interesting about this, as we look back, that was just about a week ago, and many homes, and our heart goes out to the people that had problems with their homes flooding and businesses, even right after last year's flooding. So as we talk about that, the reason that we're talking today about it, Empire Industries, LLC, first tell people if they're not familiar, what does your company do, Steve?
Well, we manage single-family properties, about 500 homes in the greater Houston area. And so we offer full, complete turnkey operation for investors. We also do real estate sales and acquisitions for investors or regular home buyers and sellers. So we pretty much run the gamut of anything that could or would be needed in the real estate market.
And that's a lot. 500 homes in the Houston area. And we just talked about the rains that fell upon all the homes in Houston.
Yes.
So let's kind of set the stage. We are individuals. Myself, I just have one home. I live in my home. I was fortunately spared from any problems. Businesses also suffer, but people that have their properties for rent, either rent it and manage it themselves, or they turn to professionals, as they really should, like yourself. And once again, you have 500 homes in the Houston area, and when the rain fell, how many of those homes had water problems?
We had, as far as floodings go that were pretty catastrophic, I would say we had about 10 to 12 properties. And, you know, what's interesting is we manage 500 houses, but when you think about it, that's 500 families living inside of those houses. And inside, you know, you have these families of multiple people, and they have lives that go on. And what's very it's encouraging and troubling at the same time that you have to see some of these families that all of a sudden their lives are just ripped apart and disrupted. And, you know, you see on the news where you see people's stuff get floating down the street. Well, when you actually know the people and you know them and you've dealt with them and you find out their stuff was the stuff that's floating down the street, you can attach a story behind the family, which is behind the household, which is behind the property you manage. So it actually goes a little bit more in depth. It's kind of like peeling off layers of an onion as you get into it. Now it's a little more personable. And so you know these people and you're going, man, that wasn't just a house that flooded. That was someone's family and life that just got ripped apart. And now we're tasked with, you know, a monumental task in my mind of, you know, being calm, cool, and collected, coming up with making sure we have a plan, we have a disaster plan in our operations, and enacting that plan and step by step making sure that we follow through on the steps.
And as you said very briefly, as a property management company, you help people, you manage the property for the individual that uses it as an investment or whatever other reason. You manage and the day-to-day details, the things that they don't want to and they can trust you with. But yes, here's the extra element. What about a disaster? So first of all, let's tell people what they can expect from your company. by having that protocol in place, by having a disaster plan, and certainly we had that disaster last week.
Sure. And, I equate that to my other life of being an airline pilot, that it's kind of the same thing. When you have a disaster, you have to have a plan. Okay. And that plan in the aviation world, you have checklists and you have things that you go to that when that disaster happens, you're not just shooting from the hip, you actually have a strategy. So we run our company the same way. We have a strategy. So for example, our disaster plan, that once the dust settles and the flood has happened, now it's time for us to enact that plan, which the first plan was, okay, we have, let's just say for the sake of argument, out of 500 houses, we have maybe 30 vacant units that are being leased out or being turned over for maintenance. The first thing we had to do was have each one of our maintenance technicians walk all the vacant units and make sure there was no damage to those properties, because you can't call an empty house because no one's going to answer, right? We've got to see, is anything flooding? Is there any damage? Is there gas lines bursted? Anything like that, we have to make sure. Then we took the monumental task of everyone in my company started calling each and every tenant, and not just the one tenant, because don't forget, you have multiple people living in that house. Every number we had on file, we made the phone call, and we had to make sure, are you safe? Is everything okay? First of all, that's the most important thing. Are you safe? Do you need anything from us? Once they would say, okay, I'm good. We've had some water damage or we've had something. Is it an emergency or can it wait a day or two? If it's an emergency, we're going to take care of it right now, but we just need to get through our list of 500 people. And we did all of that within a day. So we took one day and we called every single person. Now, the thing about the property management business, as a lot of businesses that people don't realize, is we have 500 properties, which are 500 tenants, give or take, and then we have 500 owners. So we have 1,000 people wanting to know, number one, is their investment okay? And number two, they have a problem that they need our help with. And what thing we have to remember is we're really in the relationship business. Our service is relationships with our tenants and our relationships with our owners. And, first and foremost is the safety. And we got to make sure everyone is safe and everyone is secure and that their investment is secure. That's secondary to their safety. So it's really a stepping stone process to make sure first is safety, then, okay, how is the investment? Is the investor's investment okay? And what do we need to do to take care of that? And then if there is damage, then we have to talk to the investor and basically lay out the plan of saying, okay, you did have some water damage. Here's the situation. We have someone on site and this is what we're doing, or this is the plan. We need to get the insurance company in play. We've got to do something with the tenants. And so there's other steps with that. But, the first step is, what is the extent of the damage?
That's right. And let's create a visual for that, because a lot of things can happen. When we think about water damage, right away I go to the worst case scenario, 6 inches of water, 12 inches, whatever, water rising, lifting furniture, that's a disaster scene. But then again, there's probably those phone calls as you were making your calls when you're talking to someone that said, well, in the right corner of the house, we have a little water penetration. We've mopped it up. It's okay.
Yes.
Right. So that's the minimal.
Right.
There's the ideal, no damage, and everything's great. Thanks for calling. Then there's a little bit of damage and maybe everything in between. So that kind of paints the picture of what you would have been dealing with. But the task gets so huge when you say, that's right. If I'm your investor, I'm also saying, how's my property?
You're calling. Yeah. So we did
have the tenants. I mean, what's going on?
Yeah. So what we did
are you taking care of it for me?
And how quickly, I understand you have 500 properties, but where am I on the list? I want to be number one.
Exactly.
I've got several $100,000 invested. I want to be the first on the list. I don't care about your other clients. So, and we
That's
understand
what I'm paying
that.
you for.
Exactly. And we understand that. And our goal is to, in an emergency, somebody has to take charge and somebody has to say, okay, you know what? This is what we're doing. This is the plan of action. And so the plan of action, what we did is we sent an email to all owners saying, we understand everyone is wanting to know about their properties. We are calling all tenants and walking all vacant units. And if you have damage, we will call you immediately. If you do not have damage, please let us get through everyone on our list so that we can see the extent of the damage, because we only have so much staffing and we can only be on the phone with one person at a time. And we'd rather be on the phone checking the safety of our clients, of the tenants, than talking to an owner about what ifs. So let us get the data, let us get the information, and then we can go from there and come up with a plan of action. And we did have some that took on water. We did have some that were, we had some water in the garage. It's nothing major. It's okay. We had some people say, while I've got you on the phone, I've got a leaky sink. Could you guys maybe come? That's not why we're calling. We understand, but just let us breathe a little bit and let us take care of what's important. And, what was interesting is so many tenants were so appreciative of what we did, of just calling and checking on them. Owners as well. Owners said, you know what? I've had investment properties for years. I've had, there's blizzards, there's everything all over the country. I've never had a property management company step up and actually call every single tenant, let all the owners know. And we even went a step further that we sent out some blast emails to all the people in our industry, whether they were realtors or mortgage brokers, saying, hey, if you need anything from us, we will step up and do whatever we have to do to help you. Let us know. Even if you're not a client, even if you're an investor without an investment property that we manage, right now, if you need help and you need something from us, we will step up and help you any way that we can, whether it's volume discounts that we're getting, whether it's our vendors, whatever it is, or just advice. A lot of people just want to know, what do I do? What is the answer? Like you had said earlier, you own one property, you've never been in this. You're doing it yourself if someone's doing it themselves as a do-it-yourself landlord, this happens. You're going to say, I'm in no man's land. I might as well be on the moon. I don't know what I'm doing.
I didn't plan for this.
This wasn't in the book I read. There's no chapters that talk about this.
Surely the tenant will understand, but they won't. And that's why I say many times, you guys, we're so fortunate to have you as a sponsor. And that is that you are the premier property management company. And why? Because you just said some very important things. That word right there, when there is trouble, and even when there's not, you have to take charge. You can't be blindsided. Yes, it's okay for the tenant maybe to be blindsided or even the investor, but this is what they rely and entrust upon you. Mm-hmm. You have to take charge. And I want to go back to, and I'll say, you mentioned it, yes, you're an airline pilot, United Airlines pilot, full-time international airline pilot, so you have protocols in place. That's been in your blood, Steve, probably when you were born, but certainly when you got in the airline profession, because guess what? Stuff goes wrong, and you can't do research at that time to figure out what to do next. You have to have the plan in place. You have to have done your research and then take care of business, right?
Yeah, and what's interesting about this situation is I was actually in Tokyo, stuck in Tokyo, and I couldn't get into Houston because of the storm. But because I have, 16 employees that work for me, they knew what the plan of action was. And when I landed, it was already being enacted. They were already taking care of everything. But had I been a one-man show and no one taking action, I would have landed, had probably over 1,000 voicemails of people saying, what's going on? But everyone knew the plan. They knew what to do. And it just basically happened the way it should happen, just like anything.
And Steve, before we take a break, tell people your website so that they can look at it. Maybe they're at their computer right now.
Sure. It's EmpireIndustriesLLC.com, www.EmpireIndustriesLLC.com.
And ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Steve Rosenberg and Bill Napick right now. We're going to take a short break and come back with even more.
If you've invested in rental property, it makes sense to invest in a property management company built specifically for your needs for the cost of a cup of coffee a day. BBB Business of Distinction and national award-winning Empire Industries Property Management will make your property a profitable, headache-free business investment. Visit online at EmpireIndustriesLLC.com or call 888-866-6727. Mention this ad and get a 1-month free management fee to try us out. Empire Industries Property Management, 888-866-6727.
And welcome back. Successful Living with Bill Napick and Mr. Steve Rosenberg. He is president and founder of Empire Industries, LLC, full-time United Airlines pilot. In the meantime, we were talking about the flooding that took place April 18th, Monday, and how a property management company, a premier property management company, put their plans in place and took care of business. Steve, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.
All right, we talked about a lot of things. There's a million questions, but we can only cover so much. We tell people to go to EmpireIndustriesLLC.com. And one of the things that you do that's so important, disaster or not, you're there to help people and answer questions. So there's tons of videos on there, a lot of information just for the taking and for the time. Now, as you made those phone calls, and we're going to talk about communication here in a minute, but the families and homes that did have water damage that you were managing their property, what happened? How did you handle that?
Well,
especially the bad ones.
Yeah, so we had some that were pretty severe. That actually we had one set of tenant that actually ended up getting I guess it'd be called lifeboated. They got boated out,
goodness.
rescued via boat out of the house. And so we have to make two tough phone calls, right? First, we have to talk to the tenants to see how are they safe? Is their family safe? And then you got to call the owner, and you got to let the owner know about his investment property of what's going on. And, whenever a tenant moves into a property, we always advise them that they should get renter's insurance. And this is a perfect example of why they should get renter's insurance because, number one, and obviously this is not the time you want to rub it in if they don't have it, but if they do not have renter's insurance, their stuff is not going to be covered, chances are, in the flood. The owner's property, depending on, how the rain came in, and that's for the insurance company to determine, but he most likely will be covered. The tenant, not so much. So all the belongings of this tenant and what, again, you've got someone that their whole life, I mean, just imagine if you rented a house or owned your house, if all of a sudden everything you owned was gone and you're being taken away on a boat. And, water is the worst kind of damage that can happen to a property with mold and everything. It's horrible. And so, we have to deal with the compassionate side of first making sure they're okay. And the first thing we try to do is we want to get them shelter. So obviously, if we have a vacant unit that's not damaged, that we can put them in, we want to put them in that property just to give them a roof over their head, to let them know, hey, you know what? We're on the same side as you. We need to make sure you're okay and that your family's safe and that everything's okay. Then it's a matter of cleaning up and ascertaining the damage, meeting the insurance company out at the property because, a lot of our owners, 50 to 60% of our owners do not live in Texas or in the country. Well, how are they going to get the insurance guy to meet the insurance guy at the property if they're over in Dubai or they're some other country? They can't. So that's where we have to step in and we have to meet the insurance agent over there, find out what's going on, find out the damage, find out the length of the damage, what is the owner's obligations as far as the lease agreement. We obviously, you can't charge the tenant while they are not living in the property if it's not inhabitable anymore. And what is the time frame to fix this? Of course, as you can imagine, everybody and their brother is now a contractor that does mold remediation now in Houston. And, everyone now is just backed up for months and months and months. I mean, it's sad, but it's a good bump in the economy for the construction business right now. And there's going to be a lot of remodeling and stuff, but there's a waiting list. So if you don't have someone that you know and that you can trust, you may be getting the guy in the truck that really doesn't know about mold remediation. It's kind of like during the hurricanes, right? Everyone's a roofer. Now everyone's a mold remediator. And then we have to talk to the owner and we have to explain to the owner, look, this is the situation with your investment property. And again, it's one of those things that if you're properly insured and you look at it like a business and you take the proper steps, you're going to look at it correctly. If you do not have the right insurance and you did not take the proper steps to insure the property correctly, and you did not plan for something like this, meaning having a contingency fund for lack of rent or something like that, then you may not be in such a good position. And again, we don't know exactly what each owner is. Our job is just to report what we're finding. And again, it's Mother Nature. It's an act of God, basically. There's nothing we can do about it. But our job is to put the pieces of the puzzle back together again after they've been kind of shattered apart.
It's very difficult. Yes, and all along the way, communication is so important. One of the things that before we get into the communication a little bit that comes into mind is what you said earlier. Hey, I want to be at the top of the list. So you have a lot of people saying, hey, what about me? What about me?
Yeah.
Get me first.
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
Well, obviously, if I have an owner calling or emailing me personally, normally, we have property managers and each owner is designated a property manager. So we have 4 property managers. At this day, everyone, it was kind of all hands on deck. Anyone that basically could put a phone in their hand was calling owners and tenants to let them know. But if we have an owner that's calling me saying, hey, I want to know, then if they're calling me, if it's getting to me, then I was taking the extra step to actually go and find out personally, what is the status of this property? This owner wants to know right now. And then, we would it's kind of the squeaky wheel. right? At this point, we've got someone that maybe this guy has 10 properties and he's got a lot of liability out there right now.
Because you do have people that have more than one property.
Absolutely. So, the average owner for us owns about 3 properties, of the 500, but we have some that own 20, some that own 40. So, they want to know, how am I going to pay my mortgage for next month? I've got 40 properties. How many flooded? What was the situation? So we understand that. Being an investor myself, I get that part of it. So I want to make sure that I can, look at it. Also, I understand we're a business and I understand all that, but I'm also an investor and I do understand, hey, I want to know the situation right now and I'm calling you and I want you to tell me an answer. And I feel that it's my obligation to get them that answer.
Well, it's fascinating to talk about this, and also the fact that whatever business, you may not even be interested in the flooding that happened here wherever you're listening, but I'll tell you what, that some of the takeaways from success principles as we bring forth all the time, you want to take charge. You want to have a plan in place, and you know what? A disaster comes upon you, and you didn't have that plan. Use this as a learning lesson.
Yeah.
Also, be mindful of how we communicate. How do you handle the person that is the squeaky wheel? How do you handle each and every one of your clients, as you did have that broad reach out? Now, as we wind up a little bit, Steve, tell us also, people that are out there here in Houston or anywhere else, especially in Houston when we talk about realtors. There's realtors all over it, and we know a lot of them listen to this show. Tell us about, you have what's called an agent referral system, right?
Sure. And so just real quick about the agents, we feel the agents are extremely valuable partners to us all over the city. And like I said, one of the things we did is we reached out in a couple of blast emails to them individually saying, hey, if there's anything we can do for your client, even if it's a regular home buyer, seller, or a property management, we will help you, because to me, that's just the right thing to do, right? That's just being a good person. And if the shoe was on the other foot and somebody had the means to help me and I needed it, I would like to think that somebody would reach out and say, hey, let me just step up and do the right thing. So, and I think that's part of the relationship we have with a lot of our agents. And that's why we are the number one referred property management company for real estate agents. What we do is, when an agent has an investor client that they do not want to manage properties for, we make sure that we will give that agent a referral every single month. For the first year, we pay them a percentage. And most importantly, being their partner, we want to make sure that we give them the opportunity to resell that investor's client. So they look at us we're basically synergistically working alongside of them, where we feel the agent's job is to help the investor buy the property, maybe help them sell the property, help them buy more properties. Our job is really to manage that investor's asset, to look after that investor's asset, make sure it's out of litigation and lawsuit, and make sure it runs like a business. And case in point was exactly what happened here. If I was an agent that I maybe managed 5 or 10 properties or 20 properties for an investor, I would not have the means to handle a catastrophe that just happened if I did not have the volume and the scalability. And that's what we bring to our agents. And that's why so many agents like us is, number one, they get paid for a referral from us every month. And more importantly, should that owner ever want to sell the property, we give it right back to the agent for the sale. We're only interested in managing the asset.
And once again, we'll direct everyone to Empire Industries, LLC. You can find out so much more, and you are certainly a friend of the realtors. You help them when they can't, or when their client wants to lease the property. So you're serving so many people. I don't know how you do it, but I do know this, a premier company, as you go above and beyond, and it's no secret, people have reached out to you outside of Houston, and in fact, outside of this country, for the tips on how you have done so well. In the meantime, thank you, Steve Rosenberg. Once again, Empire Industries, LLC. Mr. Steve Rosenberg, you're listening to Successful Living with Bill Nampick and Steve Rosenberg. Thanks for listening. Go to Bill Nampick YouTube channels, and also check out all the videos on Steve's website. Until next week, thanks for listening to Successful Living. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Bill.